Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Ben Kinney. Today I'm joined with Chad Himes.
Hello.
And Bob Stewart.
Ben Kinney.
He is so confusing, ladies and gentlemen.
Really is.
Today, we're going to talk about a subject that matters.
Oh, yes.
Because relationships matter. So what we're going to talk about today is relationships and how to stay in relationship with somebody. Now, what type of relationships are we thinking about today, Chad?
Well, there's lots of different types. So we're talking about, obviously, employee-employer.
Yeah.
We're talking about those marriage, spouse-partner relationships. We're just talking friends. Bob, what else you got? Because you've got two of them running around the house.
Kids.
Yeah.
Kids, yeah.
Relationships with our kids. Those are strong ones. We want to build strong bonds in there. Relationships with our parents. Obviously, for some of us that make that choice.
I think employer, employee, that leads me to think of things like peers, right? Like I've got peers inside of the organization. Customer relationships might be another one. Really, Ben, I think we're talking about just about any relationship you have in your life that you would want to make stronger.
Everything in a bucket. Relationships matter, except for maybe like the casual encounters category. We're talking about everything.
Not this podcast.
Not this podcast. We're talking about everything else, ladies and gentlemen. How do you stay in relationship with the people that matter to you most? Because we have a goal that we will have strong, powerful, valuable, lasting, mutual, mutually
beneficial.
Those types of
Relationships that help each other.
Relationships that help each other, that last for a long time, only if they bring that value mutually.
Yeah, you know, Ben, it's a quote that I was reading. It was a relationship is not based on the length of time you spent together. It's based on the foundation you've built together. And I think a strong foundation, as we know, will obviously bring longevity along with it.
Anybody that's ever screwed up a relationship has a friend that cares about them, or a mom or somebody else, especially, not to be sexist, but especially if you're a guy, you've been told to read one book to help your personal relationships, right? What is that, Chad?
That's the 5 love languages. And if you have not been told to read it, everyone has done you a disservice. Go get a copy of the 5 love languages.
That's right. It reminds me of one of the earlier books that came out. That it was Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But today, let's talk for a second about the 5 love languages. And when it comes to personal relationships, Chad, let's walk through each one of the languages and just talk about it quickly. And then we'll transition more into business, corporate, employee, partner, that kind of conversation.
And the best thing, as you just said there, Ben, was the 5 love languages comes in so many versions. So we've got the traditional 5 love languages. We've got 5 love languages for kids. We've got 5 love languages for the military. And we have the love languages in the workplace as well. And overall, they might change the wording of them, yet the 5 love languages are, first, words of affirmation.
You are so good looking.
Oh, thanks. Dad always said I had a face for podcasts.
You do. Absolutely. I agree. Your dad was so smart.
That's it. You know, words of affirmation. It's those positive words that you say to other people that they want to hear all day long.
Yeah. What's the next one?
Okay. Next one on your list, you've got quality time.
Quality time. That would be scheduling something for my wife and I to go out and have dinner on a Friday night and getting the kids off of our, unloading them to grandma, right? Just that time that is not in your everyday routine. That's something special and above.
And that there's quality to it. And that would be putting your phone down while you're doing that, Bob, and being present in that moment.
Number 3.
Okay. Number 3, it's gifts. It's receiving gifts. And to some people, it's obvious what it is. To some people, this is a huge love language. And the interesting thing is that some people, all of these love languages are going to change, right? We're going to have really high in some of these and really low in some of these. Gift giving is our 3rd of our love languages that we're halfway through.
Which is funny because I tend to give a lot of gifts to people.
Yep.
Simple things, books or whatever that might be. Like, that's definitely a way that I show love. I don't necessarily love receiving gifts, with one exception. Like, I can buy myself any of the junk that I need. So when people send me junk, it doesn't do much for me. It goes into the closet or it gets given away to the other employees. But if somebody takes the time to make me something, or if they found something that they knew meant something to my past or something that I've said, if it has some thoughtful to it, right? I really enjoy that gift because it tells me how they feel about me, right? What's
Sure.
the next one?
And the next one on there, acts of service. Okay, so this is doing something for someone. Bob, got an example?
Well, I was talking as we were preparing for this about taking out the garbage, right? And that's like my role, is one of my roles in my relationship with my wife. I'm
It's
supposed
actually
to take
his
the garbage.
only role.
Aaron might tell you that. But I take the garbage out, and it's actually it gets to a point where she's constantly having to remind me, hey, the garbage is full, take the garbage out, the garbage is full, take the garbage out. If once a month, which it probably doesn't even happen that often, I actually just go take the garbage out with her without her having to tell me, she loves that. Like, it's such a simple, stupid thing, right? But it's like this unexpected act of service, right? She expected to have to remind me, and so when I actually do it without being reminded, she likes it.
Does she like make the pyramid of like the bottles on top and keep stacking it?
No, she
taller
literally
like
just
Everest?
opens the door and throws stuff under the sink. And so when I end up having to take the garbage out, I got to collect all the stuff. And she doesn't push anything down either. I'll go in there and push it down and be like, look, there's half of the garbage can still empty now. But
Aaron doesn't get mad. She gets even.
She does.
Absolutely.
Chad, what do we
And
next?
she might withhold the fifth language here, Ben, which is physical touch.
Uh-oh.
If she's not happy with Bob there. And of course, physical touch. So many people are having a challenge with this one during the shelter in place. They weren't allowed to go around hugging people. And physical touch is a very popular love language. People have given those hugs, given those high fives, those pat on the backs, whatever they're going to be. It's exactly what it is. It's physical touch.
You know what's interesting about this book is that when I first read it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I understand how I show love. But that isn't just what this book is about. The book is about understanding how you naturally show love,
Yes.
how your partner, right, naturally shows love, but how they also want to receive it. Yeah. And the good example would be like, you know, Bob says, well, I love you because I take out the garbage for you every night, and I do these things for you, and I tell you that you're beautiful, right? But really what she wants is she wants that 2 hours alone
That's my wife.
without Bob on his phone playing Clash of Clans, you know, or working. She wants that because that's how she receives love. And I'm making that up because I obviously
well,
don't
it's
know.
funny you say that, Ben. So before Aaron and I got married, we actually we went through this book, and there's a whole course that you can do. And Aaron and I did the course, right? So there's workbooks and all these things. And what ended up coming, I'm a words of affirmation person. I give a lot of words of affirmation.
What a
That's my love
surprise.
language. My wife's love language is quality time. And Erin actually has she's not one to just offer up words of affirmation very often, right? And so, and I'm not one to go out and like initiate quality time. And so a lot of our kind of learning to have a stronger relationship has been around that idea of I give it a certain way, but that's not hers, right? And so figuring out how I get better at being the quality time person and how she gets better at being the words of affirmation person so that we can experience those love languages from each other more effectively.
Absolutely. And what you'll find, and you can go online and you can just Google it. It's easy to find. It's the 5 Love Languages quiz, and you can take it, or you can have your kids take it, your teens take it. You're going to find out what your top 1 or 2 love languages are, and they'll rank all 5 of them in order. So you'll realize which ones are your lowest. And what you have to remember is you've got to figure out how to fill the tanks of other people. Yeah. That's what they're really talking about in this book. It's filling the tanks of other people and knowing what matters to them and what are those things. My wife, quality time is one of her top things. And, you know, it doesn't matter when you, Ben, you do wonderful things, you do give gifts, you do love to, you know, cheeseburgers is, I think, a love language for you that's not in the book and all that. Yet you weren't far from our house not too long ago. And when my wife found out, she was like, well, have him stop by. And the fact that you just stopped by and we hung out and talked for 45 minutes was just, it meant the world to her because you filled her tank of showing love in that situation.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
And this conflict happens when we think we're giving love in the right way, and yet we don't understand that it's not the love they want.
Correct.
Right? There's a gap between. And you see these conflicts all the time that they say, well, we never spend any time together. And the other person says, all I do is spend time with you. And they're like, well, that doesn't count because we're just watching Tiger King or whatever that thing might
You and the Tiger King show.
might be, right? Or there's such a gap in understanding that. So I think it's important to go out there and figure out what are yours, because that is probably going to be normally how you show it
Yes.
without training yourself. So just out of curiosity, what's yours?
Oh, quality, or mine is physical touch and words of affirmation. Those are my two.
Yeah, mine's words of affirmation and acts of service.
So, Ben, this isn't only for our relationships. We're talking in this situation, Bob and I are talking about what's going on at home and things like that. Yet this is also in the workplace. And that's why there's a version of the book that's dedicated to work. You know, maybe physical touch is more a literal pat on the back, not a hug because of the way the world is or things like that. How do you see this transitioning into maybe around your business or places that you've been, places of work? How are you showing love to your employees, your staff, and people around you?
You know, I've never read the 5 Love Language book for the workplace or whatever they call it. I'm sure it's great. I never did. But after reading the original book, I definitely made a connection for me. And I remember walking into a room in my very first company, this sales business that I created, and I started looking around the room and I said, if I was wanting to get the most out of my people, like allow them to become their potential and push them to do what they wouldn't do naturally, and I wanted to stay in business, what would I have to do? And, you know, a lot of businesses, they say, well, we're going to give prizes or we're going to do a contest or we're going to give awards out. And I started looking around the room and I saw this guy and I said, you know what? That guy, if I told him, you're awesome, you're so good, especially if I did it publicly and said, hey, everybody, I just want you to know that Chad is killing it.
Yes.
He's awesome, right? That he would look around and he would run faster for the next week. That was his language. Well, I looked around at the next person and I said, well, that person, let's just pretend it was Bob, right? That Bob person, Bob cares about money. He wants to make more money. If I could show him how he's going to make more money, that's all he cares about. He doesn't need recognition, doesn't need anything else, right?
Yep.
And then I go over to the next person and I look and there's Dave and I said, Dave, you're doing really good. You're in second place. You're right behind Chad. And I knew that by saying that, it would drive him nuts because he's competitive. He's driven by winning and he doesn't want to be, right, in second place. And then when I'm done with that conversation, I walk back over to Chad and say, hey, Chad, you're doing great. You're doing great. You're in second place, right? Well, there's another person. They would go above and beyond for a prize. And the comment that I've always made is, you know, our people can make 500, 1,000, whatever that amount of money is by selling a widget, right?
Jump out of a window for an iPad, though.
They would jump out of a window naked for an iPad, for an iPod, like for something that's a couple $100, right? They get so excited about it, even though they could buy 5 of them or 10 of them by just doing great at their job.
Yeah, you know, those are people whose love language is gifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a last person. And this last person in the workplace is the hardest to manage because they're always only motivated by fear of loss. And it's fear of loss or disappointment. And you got to walk up to them and say, Bob, I just want you to know that I'm really disappointed in how you're performing right now. And you told me you were going to do X, Y, and Z, and you aren't living up to the promise that you made me. And I just don't understand. I just thought you were a different person, and I walk away. Right?
Oh,
or
you just broke that person.
Or the other worst one, you know, worst one to manage, you walk up and say, hey, this is your last warning. If you can't pull it together, right, we're not going to be in business together. I give you till Monday. And I don't like to use that language very often, only if I truly mean it. But you think about all these different ways to stay in a relationship with people. Yeah. You can't just pick a prize and give everybody an iPad. That doesn't work. Somebody else is going to say, I don't care about an iPad. Right?
Yep.
You have to figure out, what is it? Recognition, competition, prizes.
Praise.
Some people, what they really want is to say, Dave, if you're doing a really awesome job this week, if we get this done, why don't we take part of Friday and just you and me, let's go for a walk or go to lunch or go to dinner or let's go do something together. They want that one-on-one time with their partner, with their boss.
Yeah.
How is this sitting with you, Bob?
Well, I guess the thing that I think about from a, you know, like you're talking about with our employees or in the workplace is just like in your relationships, you naturally give a certain way, right? So if words of affirmation is your thing and you think you're walking around the office and you're patting everybody on the back and you're saying, hey, great job, you're crushing it, you're killing it out there, you have to understand probably 80% of your workforce doesn't receive it, right? That's not their love language. And so those pats on the back are hollow to them. And they're like, man, I wish Ben would take me to lunch, right? Like that quality time that I see him doing with some of the other people on the team. So I think you really have to realize what are yours, because that's probably how you think you're walking around your organization, like giving out love, but you're doing it in one way, generally, maybe two. And again, 60-80% of the organization's that doesn't mean anything to them.
Imagine going to Chad and calling somebody out and say, Chad, you're killing it. You did number one yesterday. You sold 3 widgets. And that person hates recognition.
Yep.
Right. And they would rather, right, not perform. You could actually get the adverse result by doing that.
Yes.
Another thing I see is insincere gestures of appreciation. Somebody walks by and says, hey, I heard you're killing it. Great job, the high five guys, sure. the gals that just say things, but they don't even slow down to do it. If you're going to take the time to appreciate somebody, stop, right? We'll talk about this in a minute. Look them in the eye and say, Bob, I really appreciate what you did last week. David told me that you did this, this, and this. And that makes a difference to a company. That makes a difference to me. What you're doing actually matters, and I wanted you to hear it from me.
And here's the thing about the love languages, and Bob's right, Ben's using it. Even though Ben didn't read the business book of it, he read the personal book of it and took those love languages into business, which is really, you can say I've read all of the books by having read one of the books. They're just some different terms for them. What you have to remember is you might want to find out what the other people's are. And we're talking about taking the quiz at home, yet why not have every employee who comes to work for you as part of your onboarding program take the 5 love languages quiz at work? Because there's the version for at work. And now all of a sudden, you're not worrying about patting that guy on the back that wants the public recognition that you're just quietly patting, or you're not worrying about turning off that person who does not have words of affirmation high on their list, and they actually dread words of affirmation.
We did this inside of one of your companies, Ben. I don't even know if you know this, but our president did this with our entire team inside of one of the companies, and I can tell, right? Like I know he knows my love language because there's certain times when he expresses that thing to me, right? So he definitely took it. He understands what the team looks like and what the makeup of our team is, and has become probably more diversified in how he spreads that around.
So how do we strengthen this?
It's not my job to know everybody in my company's love language. Mm-hmm. It's my job to know those who report to me.
Yes.
And to enforce to my people that they need to know it of the people that report to them, so that it trickles down through the organization.
And it's not changing. Someone whose quality time is always going to be quality time. You can't force them to become words of affirmation because that's what you love to give. We've got to understand that. And Ben's right. As he said right at the top of the episode, we're talking about relationships that you want to strengthen and turn into lasting relationships that bring value. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in your workplace doesn't bring value. You have direct reports that are bringing value, and it's their responsibility to continue bringing value by knowing their people, so you don't have to know everybody's love language.
Bob, if we look back through our relationship together, can you think of times that I've showed you that I've cared?
Yeah.
Yeah. But of those times, what was the most impactful?
The most impactful?
To you, or what comes to your mind? Like,
I get the most impactful would be when you reached out to me around the acquisition of one of our previous companies and said, hey, I'm going to buy this company back and I'd love to have you come and help me run it. Basically.
Yeah. So that was like a compliment.
Yeah, it was the words of affirmation. Like, hey, I appreciate the job you did getting this thing to where it was, and we went our separate ways. But man, I'm bringing this thing back, and I'd like to have you as a part of the team. Yeah, it was definitely words of affirmation for me. I was like, man, Ben thinks that I can do this, right? Like he wants me as a part of the team.
Yep. I was thinking there was going to be those sweet Jordans I got you like a year ago, so I completely missed that one. Right?
Not at all. Well, you just proved the point, though. Bob thinks words of affirmation is his love language. You think gifts as your love language. You gave him the shoes. He heard you say something that matters to him.
It's really funny, Ben, because I had a lady call me recently who, and you probably know who this is, but she called me and said, hey, I'm kind of doing this little book report thing or something for Ben. And he had told me to reach out to some of the people in our organization. And it was almost around this conversation. And one of the things we had talked about is I had said, I think yours is not words of affirmation. And I had said, one of the things that I think that Ben does a really amazing job with is letting people know that he cares, but he's not always patting you on the back and saying, hey, great job. You really crushed that. Right. Like, because I think you're just one of those guys that's always kind of, well, what's that next hurdle we can jump? What's that next hill we can climb? But you do a good job of showing us you care. And I actually shared with her the story. I said, I walked into his office one day and he pulled a box out from under his desk, and it was a pair of Jordans, like these really limited edition ones. And I was floored by it. But at the same time, when you asked me, like, if we could look back, what is that thing? To me, I went right into my love language.
Of course. I remember coming into the office one day and there was an autographed football from Steve Largent sitting on my desk.
Nice.
And there was a note, just a little Post-it note that said it was from Ben. And I remember going up to Ben and he was like, I think the guy who signed it's like important or something. I mean, he had no idea who it was, yet he knew I was a sports fan, so giving the gift. Yet if you had asked me the same question, it wouldn't have been that moment. It would have been when you said, Chad teaches my stuff better than I do when we used to do IMSD. That's what you would tell people when they'd say, Ben, we want you to come talk. Nope, Chad teaches my stuff. It's the words of affirmation is what I hear, just like you hear, Bob. Yet, Ben, to you, it's the gifts that you've been given. Now, what we've learned so far through this podcast is you said Ben's not words of affirmation. Ben earlier said he's not gifts if they're not very special, unique gifts. So gifts would be one of his. If you've ever met Ben, you probably know physical touch is not one of Ben's love languages on there. We've narrowed down the list very quickly as to what's left for Ben's love languages. We'll leave it to you to figure it out. So next time you're with Ben, you can figure out how to actually show him the love.
So, Chad, what I think this brings us to is, and it's a good conversation, is how do you create habits in your life that create stronger bonds in the relationships that you have that matter with your honey bunny, right? With your children, with your parents, with your employees, with your partners, with your bosses, however that might be. Remember, it has to be a two-way street. So I could be really great at showing love to my people. Often people forget to show that love back. Right? And I also have to understand that I naturally, as Bob pointed out, I don't give recognition easy, at least not verbally. I probably do more behind the scenes recognition than most people know, of just saying, Bob kills it. Like, if you need something done, call Bob. He's the smartest guy I know when it comes to this particular thing, right? And I do a lot of that, positioning Bob in that way, but I have to create a habit to go to people, especially people that I don't have as strong of a relationship with as I do with you two knuckleheads, is I got to go and just say, you know what, for a second, I need to reach out to that person and I need to tell them something. That could be happy birthday. It could be happy anniversary. It could be, I heard you're sick, or I heard you did a good job. And what I'm doing is I'm building a system around me where my people will remind me and say, hey, I just want you to know it's Joe's birthday today. Or I just want you to know that Joe's sick today. I just want you to know, because I'm not going to be scrolling through the socials to figure that stuff out, right? And I need to create systems and habits around so that I'm notified and that I can make a couple of important reaches out, which reminds me of a company that you and I both worked together at, Bob.
Yeah. So we had the founder, one of our co-founders in that company, just one day I can remember sitting in this office, and he had said, we had a service business essentially, right? We customer support and all these things, and we get all these inbound people coming and say, hey, I need this thing. I need help with A or B or C, right? And we sat down one day and he said, what if every day we just decided once a day, everybody in the company, and at that point, I don't know, maybe we had 10 employees or something. He said, what if once a day, every single person in the company did an intentional reach out to somebody unexpectedly, where we were going to give something of value to that person, totally unexpected. And we actually wrapped it around inbound requests, right? So we'd get an inbound request, we'd solve that request, and as we went back to them and said, hey, here's the solution to your challenge, your problem, your issue. Did you know this thing over here? Like, there's something you're not doing that we think you should be doing, and you get a lot more benefit out of the product if you were also looking over here. And we really took that and like ran with it. And it's been, for me, every day since then, it's become a habit for me where I'm always scanning for something where somebody's asking a question and I go, oh, I'm going to answer their question, but I also know they need this help right here, and I'm going to give it to them unexpectedly. And the comment that John made around that was, when you do that, you create raving fans, right? You create really strong bonds and relationships with people. And he said, look, if all 10 of us in the company did this every single day, we'd look back a year later. Let's say there was 200 working days. We'd have 2,000 people that were sitting there going, oh my God, these guys actually care about me beyond just solving my widget issue, right? So, I mean, that was a habit that we got into. The entire company got into that habit, and we built a very, I mean, the following in that company was rabid. I mean, 12 years later, there's still fans of that company that are rabid.
It's because of that company I actually know both of you.
Yeah.
And even today, we have unique cultures in our company where we have this group of raving fans where we know these customers' names, very well, and probably their email addresses and their phone numbers, right? And we've created relationships with these customers where they're not going to go anywhere. Even last week, we had a technical problem in one of our companies, so we mailed them all T-shirts, right? I don't know, hundreds of people that had issues. I just mailed them all a T-shirt because I knew that if they heard from me with a note from me that said, hey, I appreciate you, thanks for sticking with me, sorry about Wednesday, whatever that might be, right, that they would understand. That's worth a lot to them. So these habits that we create that will create stronger bonds.
Ben, we just finished the Wealth series not too long ago. And one of the things we talked about in the Wealth series was being a student of wealth. And Bob, the magic thing we covered in being a student of wealth was
compound interest?
Absolutely, compound interest. And we know what that can do to our money. I'm going to share with you what it can also do as a habit in our relationship. And Bob, really sorry about the trash can story because it's not going to look so good.
Yeah, this one's way better.
Yeah, it's not going to look so good after this one, right? And it's the compound effect, which I read by Darren Hardy, which helped me with this, plus another class I had been to and a story that was shared in there. And on my wife's, the day after her birthday, I took a simple diary book, and every day I wrote something I appreciated about my wife into this book. Now, the compound effect of that had me loving my wife more than ever because I was just focused on all the things I appreciated about her, which of course created an even stronger relationship. Now, 365 days later on her birthday, I gave her the book and it was the best $9.95 I've ever spent on a birthday gift for somebody. And she still has it. And when we're having one of those days, she'll still go pull out the book and read back to that day from that year and see what was going on at that time.
I hope my wife doesn't listen to this episode.
I mean, seriously, this is a little overachieving. I apologize right now to all of you whose spouses or partners are listening to this crap that Chad is spewing at, they're just throwing out there to the world. I mean, who writes something nice about their spouse, their partner, or their person every day for a year? That's pretty well done, Chad, actually.
Thanks. Well, I've been in relationships, Ben, that weren't worth keeping, or I've been in relationships that had ended, which we'll talk about on another episode, of course. I know I wanted this relationship to be one of those strong, lasting relationships, so you have to be purposeful about these things that we're doing.
What day this year are Bob and I going to get our book of the things that you appreciate about us?
It's been 10 years. I've been working on it for the whole decade, Ben.
He's got 3 pages done.
So I'm thinking of something.
So we're going to go into a list because...
What? A list on our podcast?
Because we love lists, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to talk about a list of things that you could do to keep relationships strong, to stay in relationship, to stay in business, to stay in partnership with people. And we're going to talk about them back and forth. I'm going to start us off with the first one, which is transparency. What do you want out of the relationship, and what does that other person want in return? A good example was I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about what he was going to do when he retired or what he was going to do for vacation. And he said, I'm going to go here. And I said, are you going to bring your wife? And he's like, absolutely. And I said, just out of curiosity, have you ever asked her where she wanted to go for vacation? He said, we've been together for a long time. She always loves these things. That's not what I'm asking. Have you ever asked her how she wants to spend her retirement or how she wants to spend her vacation? Or have you just made the assumption because every time you brought her, she enjoyed it? And he looked at me and he didn't say anything. And the next day he reached back out to me and he said, you know what? I took your advice. I asked her. And he said, I didn't know that she wanted to go on a riverboat in Europe. I didn't know that she wanted to go see these places. I assumed that I didn't know that. And this is an individual that's been married for 20 or 30 years, right? And you don't have that transparency, or as I say, an understanding of each person's goals, dreams, and priorities.
And this works at work as well, talking about those key people that are working with you. You just happen to use an example again of a personal relationship, yet this is going to work in all areas of our life with any relationship.
Chad, if you and I were to wake up separately. and we were to look at each other dreamingly, right? And we were to stare in each other's eyes, and I said, Chad, the last year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years have been amazing. Let's talk about what we accomplished. What would be on that list? What do you want to accomplish? And just asking that question, right? Being willing to say, this is what I want out of our relationship, Chad, and this is, what do you want? Making sure that you're in alignment. Now, one of the things that, as we go to number 2 on the list, that you gentlemen brought up is relationships require frequent check-ins.
Yes, absolutely. You need to be having like that weekly meeting. Maybe it's with that employee situation, or it's that weekly date. Bob, you had said quality time for your wife was maybe getting rid of the kids, passing them off so that you guys could go out for dinner. It's that weekly check-in, because boy, we are all so busy with the go, 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 go of life. Maybe right now it's a little slower, yet overall the go, 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 that we don't take that time for those weekly check-ins and that specific time together.
Would we rather have 15 minutes or 30 minutes with our boss while they were kindly, partly looking at their email and their cell phone? Or would you rather have 5 minutes where they're just staring at you saying, what can I do for you? How are you doing? Right? It has to be a meaningful check-in.
Yes. Which led to another one on the list, Ben, that we had here. You just said staring you in the eyes. And that's those nonverbal actions to really strengthen relationships. Eye contact, which is really a way of saying, I'm truly listening and I'm here, I'm paying attention.
Yeah, being present, Chad.
Yeah.
Right? People value relationships where they know both parties are 100% present.
Yes. Bob, what do you got for the next one on the list?
Communication. To me, I mean, a lot of these, like the being present, doing, the check-ins, all of that boils down, I think, essentially to communication, frequent and often communication.
Two-way.
Two-way communication, absolutely.
You ever get into a habit of a one-way communication? Where we're
yeah.
talking, and say, we just talked last night. No, you talked last night, right? Two-way communication. So how do you ensure that an employee, a partner, a spouse feels communicated with, and that you feel like you got to communicate to?
Good questions.
Yeah.
That's a great one, Bob. Yeah, asking great questions, which we've talked about. One of the things that comes up, fighting fair.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not going to agree on everything. Yet you've got to be prepared to, how do we fight fair about it when we're going to have those disagreements that are going to get us to that point?
One of the things that you do really well around communication, Ben, is the Sharpie and the white piece of paper, right? Like when somebody comes in and you want them to feel heard, you will use the Sharpie and the white piece of paper, and you'll even ask them, hey, is it okay if I take notes about our conversation? But you've said in the past, you actually do that to stop you from responding, right? So that you don't have to just, hey, no, that's not right. Or no, I've got an answer for that. You just are listening. And a massive part of communication is listening. And so you've created a habit around listening so that people feel like they're able to communicate with you.
It's
better.
a control mechanism for me. It stops me, as you said, from responding or telling people you're stupid or that's not true or proving people wrong or throwing in there, yeah, but you did this thing to me first. That's why that happened. You just kind of create habits and teach yourself how to communicate, how to fight fair. And the last piece of the communication is resolve conflict quickly.
Yes.
I had a friend of mine that said, I just had a horrible fight with my spouse or with this employee. It doesn't matter. I said, great. Just out of curiosity, are you going to get divorced? No, I'm not going to get divorced. Then don't go to bed mad. Because every moment you're either working on staying in a relationship or you're working on not being in a relationship. When you go to bed mad or you go to bed not speaking, which one of those two things are you working on?
Wrong direction.
Wrong direction, right? Even with employee issues.
Yep.
Every moment that you don't resolve something, you're actually working on getting out of business with that person.
Yep.
Resolve conflict quickly. Now, Chad, you talked about rituals. How does that show up?
You know, I think rituals are what will make a relationship strong. And if everybody listening to this podcast stopped and thought about it, if you bumped into your friends from high school that you still talk to, yet you don't see all the time or whatever, you probably still have some rituals. You had nicknames for each other. You had your secret handshake, whatever it is. You know, when I see Ben for the first time after a while, I know there's going to be, you know, the fist bump that's coming. And while, but it's a ritual that we have. My wife and I, we have our rituals. Certain people I work with, we have our rituals. My daughter and I have our rituals. It's building those relationships. Those are habits that we're creating by having rituals with our partners. So keep those in mind.
What I think they just do is they reinforce that person's important in your life, right?
Yes.
Most of those rituals are things that just reinforce and remind us that other person is important.
Sure. I mean, have you ever had that time, and we don't drink coffee, but maybe you drink coffee with your spouse every morning and you guys are catching up and you're talking or something like that. And then what about that one morning where you or your spouse has to run off quickly and you're not there for it? The whole day feels different. You're missing out on that ritual. Or maybe there's somebody at the work that you always, as you first come in, you greet them and you guys have a certain saying or a joke that you say, and then they're not there all of a sudden. You're missing out on those rituals, which make the whole day feel strange. And those rituals are help bringing those relationships together.
Remember that relationships matter, that we have to make a commitment to keep relationships with our close people, our friends, right? Honey bunnies, the people that matter to us, and our top people in our company and their top people, that we have to make a commitment to stay in relationship with those people. It doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but it does take creating a habit and making time on your calendar to do these things that we've talked about, like having transparency, understanding people's goals, being present, communicating both ways, listening, fighting fairly, resolving conflict quickly, doing frequent check-ins, offering praise and the other forms of the love language. That's how you stay into relationship. That's how you stay in relationship with people that matter to you. There'll be a time where some relationships have to end. Seasons change, as we'll talk about, right? There's going to be times when relationships have to go so that you can make time in your life for the next most important relationship or the next new relationship in your life. Now, our goal is to help you stay in relationship with people that matter. If you don't, or if those relationships are not worth keeping, the next episode is going to walk you through how do you walk away from relationships where it's time.
Now, Ben, we want to keep you in relationship with us, listener. And we want our relationship with you to deepen, and we want to share our relationship with you with as many people as possible. So think about who you want to share this episode with. Have them text the word podcast to the number 59559. If they just text the word podcast to the number 59559, they'll get a link, and they also can subscribe and begin a relationship with us here at the Win, Make, Give podcast. Until our next episode, remember, wash those hands, and as always, do good.